Okay, I wanted to do another personal share on my current stage of purgation, if you will, current stage of dark night of the soul. Um, just when you thought things couldn't get any worse or drier, um, they actually can, and they do, and they will. Um, wow. So I can't remember what I've said in the other video, so I'm probably going to repeat myself, but I'm going to try to keep my videos shorter because I tend to ramble on like I'm doing now. Um, and it seems like every personal share, it sounds like the same type of purgation, purging, but they're actually very distinct, different stages. And um, I'm so grateful for having this book, Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross, because it every time I feel like something has changed, I go to the book, I feel drawn to read something in the book, and it always describes like the next stage, and it's always just spot on. Um, and I don't think adequately enough spiritual teachers out there truly discuss and describe the personal hell, or the pain. I wouldn't say suffering so much, although suffering in the beginning, pain that you go through, psychological and physical, during the stages of purgation. Um, it's intense, and I don't think enough people talk about it. I mean, maybe nobody wants to hear that, but I'm sharing and hoping to let you know how intense and awful, painful it has been for me, in case you are experiencing the same thing and you feel like you must just be a drama queen or something, or something's wrong. Um, there's nothing wrong. Now, granted, some people go easily down the road through their purgation. Maybe they have less karma, whatever. Maybe their upbringing was different. Doesn't matter. Some of us, most of us, will have I just want you to know it gets really rough, really rough. And thank goodness, like I said, for this book, because in this book it talks about St. John the Cross, and he references biblical writings by Job, Jeremiah, John, Dave, who knows. And their writings are intense, the pain that they talk about. And I don't think any of them were drama queens or looking for attention. So rest assured that it does get really, I'd like to differentiate. It's very painful. There's not a lot of suffering, because at this point in the journey, what I'm beginning to see is the personal story has worked its way out. There's not a whole lot of, oh, poor me, I'm so stupid, or this happened to me, no past stuff. The storyline, the personal storyline has been mostly eradicated. There's still some things that come up, but there's not a whole lot of suffering, psychological suffering going on there. But when we talk about the pain, psychological, emotional, and physical pain seems to be getting even stronger and more intense. It's very much an interior pain, because what I think is what has become clear for me in my journey, what I've noticed is that in every stage, and my journey has been taking this very progressive, one stage at a time kind of awakening and purgation in each of those stages. And what I've noticed is that at each one of those stages, self-realization, God consciousness, unity, whatever. It starts off with very personal story stuff, and that purgation, you have to go through all three of the bodies, four of the bodies, um, physical, emotional, mental, maybe perhaps etheric. And then when you shift, you got to go through all that stuff again. Maybe it becomes less personal, but still it's more of your personal story, suffering. And then you get over here, perhaps in later stages of the purgation, and which is where I feel like I'm sort of at. It becomes less about the story, and you still have to clear each one of those bodies at each one of those levels. This is why it takes so long. But the purgation is of a different type. And you hear people talk about that now they're clearing things for the collective or ancestral, and I can really feel it. It's what's the kind of cleansing that is going on now. Some personal story, very little, but it's more about just dealing with all the conditioned and habitual responses that come up, kind of like before you can catch them. So it's a total reprogramming of your conditioned responses and behaviors. And it is more cosmic beliefs that we've twisted around, things like, oh, I'm not the center of the universe, the law of equality, harmony, discipline, all those big topics are there. There's only a few, and they're very basic, but they're strangely enough, they hit you to the core of your being. It's like your soul is suffering. And when you when you don't act in accordance to one of those laws, cosmic laws, it's excruciating, the pain. I don't know how to explain it to you. And I'm kind of terming this phase that I'm in like the vampiric stage because, before I explain what I mean by that. The stuff that I've been going through, it's all my habitual things that I got to stop. And I do want to say, I feel like something has shifted in me. Like I've made like a movement into like I'm now 51% fully. My first response now is to go inward instead of outward. It's like now I'm 51% or more consistently identifying with my inner self, my true self, instead of letting the habitual reactions and storyline take control for longer and longer. That doesn't happen anymore. So I feel like I've made some progress. And that just takes time. That's like a muscle memory kind of thing. But I'm beginning to feel stronger, even though the pain is worse. But I'll tell you, the last couple of months, it's kind of been like, what's the point of living? There's no more meaning to life. I mean, this part of the journey, when I say it gets really dry, I mean that there are no more lovey-dovey experiences that are coming in. And I've said this before, that God has left, it's like, God, you've forsaken me. And believe me, these guys in here talk about it. But in this chapter, St. John of the Cross talks about how it gets even drier. Like there's no ocean coming in to save you. The Divine Mother isn't going to save you and fill you full of love and make you feel good. No, it's dry. But he says in there that in order for the fire of purification to really do its job, that the wood has to be extra, extra dry, right? And so, no lovey-dovey experiences coming in. It feels really awful. And that causes the soul to ache even more. I'm going to cry. It's longing even more for the reunification of God within the body. So it gets really rough, right? I mean, the thing that the soul is wanting the most is to reunite, experience God, but it can't right now because it has to be purified. The fire has to burn at its hottest. Yeah. So, you know, this is, and I've heard so many people go through this, like at this point you're like, well, you know, there's no meaning to life. There's nothing to do. What's the point? And even though we all know, we've heard this saying, chop wood, carry water before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water after enlightenment or awakening. Uh, that phrase is saying, you know, whatever your life was before, it's going to be the same afterwards. And I know we all know that, but secretly we've been conditioned and we think it's somehow I'm going to be the different one, that life is going to be better. Well, I'm here to tell you it isn't. I mean, obviously your perception changes and there's a whole level of peace and understanding that comes along, but nothing in your external life, you're not going to be happier. Suddenly, you know, there's just not going to be rainbows out there. So it's been really challenging, especially because you're in this dry zone where you don't get the lovey-dovey experiences anymore. And so you just think, well, what was the point of this journey if it's going to end up being the same? And that takes a real toll on your psyche. You know, I'm totally in burnt out phase. I'm sick and tired of spiritual stuff. Totally apathetic, disappointed with the knowing that I'm just in a stage, but still you just deal with all this. You just come to the point where I give up kind of stage. And I think some people kind of stay there and don't hang on because it does get better. Well, that's what I hear. Anyway, so it's really a rough stage. And yeah. What else? I'm forgetting to tell you something. My little cat wants out, so I'm going to pause this. Okay, kitty detail taken care of. Yeah, so I'm calling this kind of like the vampiric stage, the vampire stage, because during this stage, like, first of all, you feel like a corpse, like a walking dead person. That's how dry you are. You've kind of given up. You're burnt out. You're burning out, burning inwards. You just feel like, ugh. And I totally just want to hide out in my little cave, my little coffin in the darkness. Just, I don't want to be around anyone. I don't want to do anything. I have no motivation for anything. It's like, terrible. Terrible. So that you feel just like a walking dead person. But also, it's like a vampire, because when you go out into the light of reality, when you go interact with the world at large, into the light, your blocks, losing some light here, blocks and challenges and your habitual reactions are really being shown to you. And it's like the light hitting the vampire. It burns. It burns because you're seeing yourself. You see that it's painful when you interact with people and you're not acting in accordance to the cosmic laws. You act like a shit or you say bad things. And it's more painful because you recognize at this point there's not you're not just hurting this personal self, that you're affecting the whole of everything. When you say a bad word or you spew anger or didn't treat somebody with kindness, you've just hurt the whole. And that pain is awful. And it's like the burning, the light on the vampire. It's just like, ah! So you like want to hide out inside all the time. And I know I'm stretching this metaphor. So you want to hide out in the darkness, and there's no love coming in. And so what happens is your cravings for sensory input become crazy. Like, oh, well, let me watch TV. Let me eat some, I don't know, find your favorite food. You start craving sensory input, right? Distractions, foods, just anything to kind of bring some love back into your life. And I think you can equate this with, the feasting of blood. It's a craving for your corporal desires, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's kind of like always going out there and wanting to eat and feed on something. So I'm going to call, this is a new stage out there, the vampiric stage. But they would stop being vampires and stop living in the dark. They would just go out there and just let the light burn them up. They would be totally transformed. And I'm working on that. They would be enlightened, right? If they let the light burn them up, they would be enlightened and they would poof away. Anyway, so that's the current stage I'm in. It is not fun. I mean, the personality will go on and do its thing, but the inner world becomes very, very dry. So don't worry and this dryness actually happens in all the stages of purgation. But there will come a time when it lasts a really long time, but don't worry. It's not doing anything wrong. God hasn't left you. It'll just feel like it. But I do notice that synchronicities are amping up, and some precog is really coming in strongly. So, you can take those things in lieu of all the lovey-dovey experiences. They will come back in the stage after Brahman or no self. It's that para-Brahman, where after the burning away of the impurities of the soul, when it's realized it's not an I, there's a reunion of the one I fully being embodied. And that's the para-Brahman stage. And then it's kind of like experiencing totality in the body, the embodiment of totality. I don't know. I think we need some more terms for all of this. Okay. Oh, I do want to say, when you have a shift when you have a shift, this is what happened to me. You catch a big glimpse, and it was enough to kind of like knock your socks off, and you could never go back to how you were perceiving before. Don't worry. The mind goes crazy, and you may spend a month or so, however long, this is what happened to me, of the mind constantly wanting to talk about it or think about it or analyze what just happened. There's no self here, there's no self here, there's no self here. What is going on? And it's constantly thinking, trying to figure it out. Don't worry. I think that's a normal stage. That is like the mind and the brain trying to rewrite something. And it has to kind of go back and forth, like rewriting. And it may take a while. So if your mind is trying to grapple, like you can't stop the mind, from analyzing something, don't worry about it. It'll wear itself out. And what happened for me, I was driving, and I was in the zone like I usually am while I'm driving. And all of a sudden, this is like a month or two after the big glimpse that shifted me. And I had that understanding, like that knowing now, there's no one here. There's not one here. There's no one here. But the mind was just driving me crazy for months. Like it just wouldn't stop thinking about it. So that was the mental plane, or the mind coming to grips with it. Then that day I was driving, and all of a sudden it just like, I could feel it like drop in 3 sections. I don't know, it was the weirdest feeling. And I just was like, holy shit, there's no one here. It was, and it kind of, and I'm getting chills, because then it was like the mental body accepted it, or the mind accepted it, and it finally landed in my body. And then the mind stopped thinking about it. So I think there's a process. So don't worry if your mind gets all crazy about something. It's just the process of the mind converting, rewriting a belief. And it was pretty funny while I was driving. I was like, there's no one here. And then I started looking around, and it was hilarious looking at all these people in their cars. And I thought, this is hilarious. They think somebody's there and no one's there. And I kind of started looking at everybody going, there's no one there. And it immediately dropped all of my defenses and fears and, oh, what do they think about me? Because I could see that no one was there. So it's kind of funny if you can kind of play with that. And, you know, I tried to play with that kind of thinking and perceiving after that one day. And it is kind of difficult. It must have just been an experience for that one moment. But if you can kind of look at somebody and kind of go, it's hilarious. They think there's some person there, but no one's really behind this face. No one is behind this face that I'm looking at. It's just the one. And it just drops all your defenses, because you're basically looking at yourself, right? Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I think that's enough. So that's my current stage of purgation, the vampiric stage.